All right, my name is Rich Schmidt. We're here with Jen Cossey. It's November 12th, 2025. We're at Brooks Wine in Amity. We're in the intern guest house today, which is exciting. Jen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
First question to get things started is why wine?
Why wine? Well, I mean, that's a question I feel like I ask myself a lot as the industry develops, as I change as a person, and I keep falling back in love with it. I think that wine resonates with so many people as a way of bringing people together, community, connection, togetherness, engagement. You know, it's so much more than something in a bottle and something, you know, often we sometimes, yes, have wine by ourselves, but usually we're sharing it with other people. And I think that bringing people together has always been so important, but it is almost more important now than it has ever been. I think that the way technology is evolving, we get more and more distant from each other every day, you know, and I think that the more we can bring people together, the better. And I think wine is such a great catalyst for that, wine and food and all of that. And it's just my pleasure to be to usher that, you know, to usher those experiences and to help support an industry that focuses on connection. You know, I mean, it really is at the core of what the wine industry is about. And I love that. I've been in the hospitality industry for almost 30 years now, which is mind-blowing in some ways, and it's always about that, right? It's what I love about it. It's what's kept me in it for so long, is that it's a people-oriented business. And there's a lot of complexity in it. And there's a beauty to the art of it and to the science of it. But at the end of the day, it's about social connection and people. And I don't think there's anything more important, honestly. So that's it. That's my why wine.
Love that. Let's talk about life before wine a little bit. Tell us about where you're born and raised and
Sure.
kind of early life.
So I'm a Midwesterner. I was born in Missouri, and I grew up in Kansas City and lived there my whole life. And just kind of did what Midwesterners do. The Midwestern life is very different from the Oregon life. You know, we go to movies a lot. There's not a lot of stuff to do outside, so most of the stuff is indoors. And spent a lot of time in malls. But I loved it. It was a great upbringing, big Chiefs fan. And I still have a very, very strong community with the people that I grew up in. I went to a very small private school in Kansas City. I had 36 people in my graduating class. And I went there from preschool to 12th grade. So my whole life, really, my whole early adolescence was in more or less one building with the same group of people. And they're still some of my best friends. It really is creating family more than it was going to school with people. And that, I can't help but think that deepness of connection that I established at such an early age has fed who I am now and the importance of connection and community and people in my life now. And I'm lucky to still have them as dear, dear friends. And we all talk a lot and go to each other's weddings and, you know, child's being born and sadly, you know, passing of family members and things like that. But it's still so much the bedrock of who I am. And I'm very grateful for that. I moved away after high school. I moved to Arizona and I went to Northern Arizona University and Flagstaff, yep. Great hospitality program there, but that's not what I was there for. I actually went to school with a photojournalism scholarship. And I got there because I loved black and white photography. I spent most of my junior and senior year in high school in the darkroom and just was obsessed with it. I was the photo editor for our newspaper and just nerding out about it. But that's when it was very analog, right? That's when everything was in a darkroom and with an enlarger and chemicals. I'm sure I've poisoned myself with years of time in the darkroom, but I loved it so much and I still do. But I got to school and I realized, I'm dating myself a little bit here, but things had moved to digital so much more. And it wasn't what I loved. I didn't love digital photography. I loved film and I loved paper and I love the tactile piece of it. So I decided photojournalism was not for me, and much to my mother's chagrin, got rid of my scholarship and went into the art education program. So I started studying art education, which is a fantastic line of study because you're learning education and principles of education, and you get to do like all the fun art classes. You get to do figure drawing and ceramics and jewelry design and photography, and that was the core of my education, was different art programs, but also education and how to train others in art. I loved Flagstaff, but I got a little bored. Very small town, knew everybody. I was kind of like, bouncing around, and a friend of mine had been living in San Francisco, and I was like, yeah, San Francisco sounds cool. So again, much to my mother's chagrin, I transferred schools my junior year and spent a couple extra years in college, but finished at San Francisco State University with an undergrad degree in art education. And decided then that I didn't want to be an art teacher because and now looking into what the world is like right now was the right decision for me. But it felt to me at the time like it was always going to be a fight. It was always going to be a battle to save art in schools. And while I felt and still feel that's important, I didn't feel like it was the best use of my time or energy. And I just didn't have the passion for it. So I wanted to leave that space for people who did. So I thought more, because I loved art, and I got into the museum side of art. So I worked at a gallery in downtown San Francisco called the John Bergeron Gallery, and I worked at the front desk at the San Francisco MoMA, and I was just really into the art world. I actually helped found an artist cooperative, and it was called the Centipede Project. It went through a few different names. It was the Bay Area Visual Art Collective, or BAVAC for short, which is a really cool, trendy idea. And we moved to the Centipede Project, but the point of it was a bunch of young artists, mostly people who had just gotten out of school, who had lost resources, right? When you're in school, you have dark rooms, and you have studios, and you have deadlines and homework, and you have all these things that keep you motivated to create. And then you get out of school, and those resources are gone, and that push is gone. And so the purpose of this collective was to give young artists who were either kind of operating on their own or had just gotten out of school a community. We always had deadlines, we had homework, so it was like, great, we're going to have a show on this date. Here's the theme of the show, create work for it. And everybody pitched in money, and we rented out space, and we did flyers, and it was great. Really, really cool experience, and definitely the start of me understanding what building programs and teams looked like. But as happens when you're living in San Francisco and working in the art industry, I was very poor. So I needed another job. And my background I'd worked in, food industries for a while. And I applied for a job at a wine bar in the East Bay called Solano Cellars. And I thought I knew enough about wine, right? I used to sell wine at restaurants, like Black Opal and Ravenswood, and these are the wines that I felt like were really premium, I know my stuff. So I went into the interview. My future boss's name was Craig Sandler, and he interviewed me. He was asking me all these questions, and so let me just, test your knowledge. And he's like, what is the grape of Rioja? And I'll never forget this interview because I was like, Rioja? And he's like, yeah, no. But you seem like you want to learn. So it was a wine shop that also had a little bar. And so every week there was 10 new wines that were opened by the glass. And my job was the bartender to pour those wines, but I had to learn about the wines before I poured them. So I was just inhaling information, hoping to one day be able to be on the floor as a salesperson, but really just was the show behind the bar at the time. My friend Tom was the main salesperson on the floor, and he taught classes once a month. And so I got to toddle along behind him and pour water and give people bread and just listen. I was just soaking it up and this is so cool. All the while still doing all the art stuff, but this was sort of my entry into wine. I traveled to Europe for a few months around that time as well, and I bopped into a couple vineyards and wineries and tasting rooms. To this day, I have no idea where I was. I kind of wish I did, but I was like, this looks cool. What's over here? What's behind this gate? And what's going on over there? And I went to Champagne, and I went to Burgundy, and just really started to fall more and more deeply in love with wine. when I came back to California, I decided that art was expensive and a lift, and while it was still part of my life and I still wanted to have it as part of my life, wine was really the direction I wanted to go with my career. So I moved back to Kansas City and started working for a company. I'm trying to make sure I have the order of things right. A company out there called Marquis Selections. And Marquis Selections was it was owned by another company, but it was a small subsidiary company. And the premise of it was we worked with Australian wine producers, small family-owned wineries, and we brought their wines into the United States, kind of like a negociant. We put our label on them, told their story though. So it wasn't like we made this wine. It was like Marquis Selections was the brand, and we told the story of the different, small wineries that we worked with. So I got to go to Australia for a few weeks, which was great. Again, deepening my love for wine, the wine industry, the people, the farming, and I started my path down certifications. This is sort of like, okay, I have this art degree, but I'm in the wine business. Like, something's not matching up. Like, I need more information, and I was so hungry to learn. So I started going down the path of the Court of Master Sommeliers, and pretty quickly got my first and second level sommelier certifications and started studying for my advanced exam. But there was this whole other world of certifications out there too. So I started going down those paths as well, and worked with the Society of Wine Educators and got my certified specialist of wine. And then because, I just love learning, I decided a master's degree was what I really needed. What I really need is another degree. So the University of Missouri, Kansas City actually has one of the best entrepreneurship MBAs in the country. It's a city that most people don't know this, but is very well established with entrepreneurs. So like Hallmark is based there, and many businesses were founded and started there. And so there's an energy of entrepreneurship in Kansas City, and a drive to support it in young people. And so the university had some really great endowments and was really progressive. And so I got my MBA from the University of Missouri, Kansas City, with a focus on entrepreneurship. And at the time, then I had this mindset of, well, I have this MBA, I should probably work in like corporate world, that's what you do when you have an MBA. So H&R Block, also headquartered and founded in Kansas City. So I went to work for H&R Block as a senior business analyst, because that was the right choice for me. And I spent a year in a cube learning how to use Excel, which at the end of the day was actually very, very helpful. I had a really, really cool job at H&R Block, but it wasn't for me, and I decided that about a year into it. My father had passed away, and when we have these big life changes, it sometimes gives you a pause to reflect. And I decided I was going down the wrong path. I was very grateful for the time and the things that I learned, but I really wanted to get back to wine. I worked at a restaurant at the time called the American Restaurant in Kansas City, which had the largest wine program in the city. It was a beautiful, beautiful restaurant in downtown Kansas City. But the wine cellar, you had to go down an elevator and under a street and then up. And it was just a lot of back and forth. And Doug Frost, who is a master of wine and a master sommelier, he lives in Kansas City, and he was my first real mentor in the wine industry. He was one of the OG sommeliers at the American Restaurant, so I came in a line of really fabulous people. But if I'm being honest, it was too big of a job for me. I had no idea how to manage a list that big. It was my first sommelier job in truth, and I just wasn't ready for it. A year later, it would have been the perfect job for me, but I just got eaten alive at that place. I was like, oh my God, I am in over. Just because you know about wine doesn't mean you can run a wine program, is what I learned. I helped a friend of mine in Lawrence, Kansas with his wine program. I developed his list because I wanted to learn. I was like, I am ill-equipped to do the work I want to do. Will you let me build your wine program for free? And he's like, totally. So I was like, all you need to do is feed me every once in a while. He's like, no problem. So I built his wine program, built his list, learned about organizing wine lists, learned about how to present in ways that are meaningful to guests at a restaurant. And then just kind of went deep down that. So a couple other wine jobs later, I was like, it's time to get out of Kansas City. I've lived here my whole life. I lived here as an adult. I've had some really wonderful experiences, but I'm done. It's time to go. So a friend of mine who is also in the wine industry right here, her name's Carrie Kalsher. She's the chief brand officer for Ponzi, also from Kansas City. Dear friend of mine, we were in tasting groups together in Kansas City, and I was like, I'm moving. And she's like, I'll go with you. And I was like, cool. So we did a little like road trip of places we may want to go. And then I came to Oregon. Jesse Lang is a dear friend of mine, and so I'm gonna air quote this, worked harvest, for a couple days. Did some punch downs, drank some wine. I was like, harvest is so fun. This is so fun. And I went to Walla Walla, and I worked for a couple days with Greg Harrington, also Master Sommelier at Gramercy Cellars. I went up to Seattle, checked Seattle out, spent some time in Portland. Came back to Kansas City and was homesick for Oregon, and told Carrie, I'm moving to Oregon. And she's like, I'll come with you. She'd never been here. We both quit our jobs. And our friend Tim also moved out with us. No jobs, just a lot of gumption and confidence, maybe displaced, but a lot of confidence in ourselves, and moved to Oregon. I had one of my dear friends, his mother had some wine underneath her sink, which is, of course, not the best place to store wine. But she's like, you can just have it. And I was like, okay, cool. And most of it was terrible. It was like cold duck and like an old bottle of Rioja and some like $2 chuck. But there was one bottle of Bordeaux, and it was like first growth. The fill line was good on it. It was a good vintage. I did some background work on like, what is this bottle worth? And it was worth just enough to get a U-Haul. So I sold it. And I got a U-Haul, and we moved out here. And that's kind of, how the Oregon story began.
As all great Oregon stories begin.
As all.
Pretty much how everyone gets here, more or less.
Selling a bottle of wine from under a sink. Thank you, Sherry Lewis.
What was it about Oregon?
It's hard to really put my finger on it exactly, but this feeling of homesickness from a place I'd never lived in before was very real for me. I was like, I just miss it. It was so beautiful, and the people were so generous and hospitable and welcoming, and it's, I feel like a melting pot of people from all over, but people who just want to live well and in beautiful places. I love the idea that you could go skiing one day and then also be at the beach the next day. I've yet to do that yet, but theoretically you could do it all in one day. And this lush landscape and the things that were growing here and the ideas that people were having. And this was 2010. So, the wine industry was flourishing, but it was still growing as it is now. But it was in this kind of baby phase of that growth where there was just a lot of new ideas and excitement and energy, and I really just wanted to be part of it.
So once you got here with your gumption,
right.
Tell me what was next.
Carrie got a job at Rex Hill where she was for very many years, and I bounced around a little bit. So classic sort of me style, just sort of like Goldilocks-y, little, this one and not this one, but this one's just right. I worked a couple different places, but landed at Selena for a little while and worked with Laurent and Danielle and managed the Grand Cru program. So it was a high-end club that was very customizable, and people had their own barrels. And my job, I was also the marketing director for the organization. And this was a lot like me getting the job at the American, where I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. This was that. I was like, marketing director, sure. Okay. How hard could it be? Harder than I thought, turns out. But great experience, and really had to pull from my wine knowledge and my business knowledge. But that's where I started to recognize the fact that the certifications and the business degree and the art degree actually helped me think creatively and analytically in most of my problem-solving settings, and what a gift that was, really. A lot of people are either sort of creatively minded or analytically minded, and they solve problems in that way. And so I think I started to recognize that having all of that, as well as a deep love for wine and a little bit of knowledge around it, really kind of helped propel me fairly quickly. So let's see, I I don't remember like my own timeline. I was at Selena and then decided I missed restaurants because I love the hospitality portion of it. And so I went to work at Veritable Quandary, and I was the sommelier at Veritable Quandary for about a year, which is when I really got to go deep on meeting Oregon producers. I met Claire Carver from Big Table Farm, and she and I became dear friends, and really loved their wine, so I had it on the list a lot, which was really fun, and folks like that, and started to meet the Oregon Somm community and become friends with them, and just go really deep in it, and surround myself with the people and the culture and the wines. And for me, it was, how do I continue to support these brands and to help grow this industry and these people's stories and their successes through being the storyteller of their wines. And that was really cool. That's one of the great things about being a sommelier and being on the floor in a restaurant or in a wine shop, is you're really a storyteller. And I love that. So I went deeper on that. After Veritable Quandary, I went to a restaurant, it had a brief life. It's had like 4 lives here in the Valley. It was called Paulé. I think it's called Wooden Heart now, but it's that building that is at the Dundee Hotel. It's had like 4 iterations, I think. So I worked for 2 of those restaurants, 2 different iterations of that restaurant. But I was at Paulé, where I worked with Brandon Tebby, who was another master sommelier, and continued down my certification path as well. Learning more things about spirits and beer and other forms, because I became more responsible for beverage programming than just wine. But then, because I was a little flighty, I missed wineries again. So I had Brian Seifer, who is a friend of mine, was working at Soder Vineyards, and he was like, I want you to come work for me. Like, I want you at Soder. We've got a lot of great work that we can do together. We're building the hospitality program there. You're so great with VIP clients. We'd love to have you be the point person for our, high profile guests that come in, as well as helping to develop the hospitality program. So I went to work at Soder as, I think it was like marketing and national sales specialist. Who knows what the title was? Doesn't matter. I was traveling a little bit. I was working with hospitality. I was doing a little bit of everything. I built some very deep and important friendships there as well, who are great friends of mine now. But what happened really was a catalyst to, I think, for me, what changed my career. So part of my job as being the host of all our VIPs, I would meet these really wonderful people. And Hans Williamson, who's the general manager and COO of the Yellowstone Club in Big Sky, Montana, came out and visited, and I hosted them, and we had a really great experience. And he, much like Brian, was like, I want you to come work for me. And I was like, oh, well, tell me more. Like, never in my mind had I thought about moving to Montana. It never crossed my mind. It wasn't one of those places that I was like, one day I'll live in the mountains. I was like, no, I'm good in Oregon. But I entertained the idea because it gave me an opportunity to do work I hadn't done before. If you're not familiar with the Yellowstone Club, it is a private ski and golf community based in Big Sky, Montana, and it hosts members like Justin Timberlake, and I think like Chris Hemsworth was there one day, and Tom and Giselle, when they were married, were members, and Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates. It was this wild community of people, that like all in one place. And there were, at the time, I think 5 restaurants. And when I left, there was about 15 different outlets. So it's really like a little city. And so my job, what I was hired to do, is to run the beverage program for all the restaurants. So never having done anything like that or having multi-unit experience, I jumped at it. And it was a great opportunity. I didn't really have anything tying me here. I had just gotten married, and we were like, let's go. Let's just go have this adventure. I was like, 3 years max. 6 years later. 6 years. So I stayed for 6 years. My career developed there. I helped open restaurants and outlets, and got involved in the community. learned a lot about development and budgeting in a really big way, because I had so many different restaurants. They all had budgets. I had a staff of about 150 front of house people during the winter, and during the summer it was a little less, but at different locations across like 2 mountains, basically. So it was a really amazing job. I loved it, but I really missed Oregon. And at the time, I had 2 kids while I was there, Isabel and Lily. They're 10 and 6 now, but that job was awesome, but it was also very time consuming. And being a new mom and having these like young people in my lives, I wanted to spend more time with them. And so I made the hard decision to move back. It wasn't that hard, to Oregon. It was hard because I love my job and I love the people I work with and I love the depth of work that I got to do, but I really needed to reconnect with my children and be part of their lives, and it was such a big job that I just wasn't. And I didn't like that. It wasn't what I wanted. And I also really missed Oregon. And so Domaine Serene, this is sort of how my path has always gone. Ryan Harris, who was the CEO and president of Domaine Serene at the time, came out and did an event with us at the Yellowstone Club and brought his family. And then he's like, you need to come work for me. And so I was like, okay, sounds fun. Let's get back to Oregon. At the time, Domaine Serene had 1, 2, 3 locations and was getting ready to open another one in Bend. I love business development. I love actually developing buildings and the design portion of it and the programming portion of it. So it was perfect for me. It was going to push me. I was able to come back to Oregon. I moved back to Oregon in February of 2020. So my onboarding at Domaine Serene was about 3 weeks long, and then everything shut down. And that was both obviously awful and challenging and scary, as it was for everybody, but also a time where I tend to work well in crisis. I feel like I'm a decent crisis management leader, because, I'm one of those people, it's like the flight attendant, like, she looks like everything's okay. Everything must be okay. Everything's okay. Quietly freaking out, but making sure everyone else feels comfortable. So it was an honor to get to lead the team through that time and to lead Domaine Serene through that time and to make some really important and meaningful changes to that organization through that time, and then kind of push through that and open the Bend Wine Lounge, which was a really beautiful experience in and of itself. And I was with Domaine Serene for about 4 years, and they started developing a spirits project. I should back up. In that time, I got a couple of spirit certifications and my certified wine educator certification, but the spirits part became more and more interesting to me as well. So I got to help work on a whiskey project with them and design bottles and look at blends and work with spirits professionals on like what to look at when tasting through spirits, especially whiskey. So that was very enriching for me. But Janie came to me with an opportunity to come and help support the running of the entire business. And again, for me to have a chance to learn new things and lean into things that I'm not totally comfortable with so that I can kind of push outside of my comfort zone and grow professionally and personally was a really great opportunity. And I have such great respect for Brooks as a brand and for Janie. And it's been really wonderful. So here we are today. I started in July of 24, so I've been here almost a year and a half, and I just love it.
It's quite a path.
Quite a path.
Quite a path. I have many questions. I'm going to back up for a minute. Okay. So you did a lot of certification fairly early on in your career. I'm curious, when you started getting into actual wine list creation or beverage direction, how prepared did you feel? What did you still have to learn? What were the biggest kind of hurdles for actually doing the job versus getting certification?
I think for me, it was more about learning how to share that information with other people in a way that was meaningful for them. So that hospitality route was really important, because you can be a master of every kind of wine and spirits and whatever, but if you can't share that information, there's no real purpose. It's just like holding information for the sake of information. And so when you're hosting people, they're coming to you with questions, or they're looking through a list, being able to assess what they're looking for quickly and in a meaningful and connective way was probably one of the bigger challenges, but also one of the biggest rewards. And it's something that I think is pulled through in most of my work in terms of understanding people and the importance of asking questions and being curious and letting them guide you. We've been talking recently about this idea of the platinum rule. You know, the golden rule is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And the platinum rule is do unto others as they would like to have done to them. And I think this idea that a one size fits all solution for everyone is a bad one. And so leaning into what people want, but finding ways to ask them those questions so that it doesn't seem presumptuous or, you know, difficult. Being a woman in the wine industry has helped me because it's, I feel like, a bit more approachable. But like, you know, people thought sommeliers for the longest time were like always in a suit and had the little taste event and were very pretentious, and like that still exists, right? And so breaking those barriers down, I'll say Doug Frost as a mentor was the root of me coming from a humble place throughout my career and being grateful for the work I get to do. Versus having this air about me because it's wine, you know, like at the end of the day, right, it's grape juice and it's farmer juice and has been consumed for, you know, thousands of years by peasants. This isn't something, you know, we've made it into this thing that's this luxury item, but really it's just something to bring people together. So that was a big one. I think, the math behind wine programming also was a learning for me, you know, and looking at inventories and understanding how to not only sell more wine and turn profits, but to make it valuable and increasingly profitable for an organization, not only to support the growth of the program, but, you know, also just the financial health of the business and the staffing. And just the importance of every dollar really not just spent, but earned as well. So all big learnings for sure.
You mentioned the first time you were in charge of a wine program being in over your head and then having to kind of go back and so tell me about now as you look back, what are the important parts of a wine list or wine program or beverage program? What are the key points? What is important to you as you're building one or if you're examining one as a consumer?
Sure, I think what I love to see on a wine list is diversity in terms of price points and wines. So sometimes you'll go into a restaurant or a wine list and it's like, it's a whole bunch of really nerdy wines and you don't really know any of them and you have to ask a lot of questions, which is fine, but it isn't about the consumer at that point. It's about the sommelier, right? It's about what they like. And so that's that golden rule piece, right? But if you think about the platinum piece of it, which is like, what do you want when you're coming into a restaurant? When I was building lists, I always like to have a diversity of prices. So there was a little something for everybody. And a few names that people recognize, and then a few things that I was really passionate about. So it wasn't just me being nerdy. I mean, like, look how much I know of my nerdy wine list, but I could teach people about things I was excited about, but I also let them feel comfortable and sort of, not really safe, but there's sort of if you see a wine list and you recognize 3 or 4 things on the list, especially by the glass list, and the rest you don't know, you're more engaged. If you look at a list and you're like, I don't know, that one, you know? So I wanted people to feel comfortable and then in a space where they could ask questions and feel like welcome. If you see something on a list that you know, you sort of feel a little bit more welcome than if it's like all arbitrary wines. So I think for by the glass programs in particular, that was important to me. For by the bottle, same thing, you know, variety of wines, variety of producers. It was always fun when at the Yellowstone Club we had so many different restaurants. I had to think really creatively about how to present those wines because it couldn't be the same thing. They were all different programs, and you know, you have people come in, they stay a week. You want them to feel like they're having a completely different experience every restaurant they go to. And so the wines that we bought, the way that we organized them on the list, the Wines by the Glass programs, the cocktail programs, everything was really geared towards the theme of that restaurant. And so I had to be like, it wasn't just being a sommelier for one restaurant or a wine buyer for one restaurant. I was a wine buyer for like 10, and I had to think about how that's presented. And what I learned is that you can't do it by yourself. So we started to really build a team there. And I think that's also really important, is have a really great team of people who are engaged. And you can't put it all on yourself. You have to teach so that other people can talk about those lists and sell wines when you're not there. I think one of the most important things I learned through that process was the importance and the value of investing in everyone else around you, because you just can't do it all yourself. You can try, and I did. It was the wrong choice.
Let me expand on that a little bit. Talk about building a team. Obviously, you've built a lot of teams, a lot of different kinds of teams. What are the key parts for you? What are you looking for when you're building a team, and what is the most important process when it comes to educating your team?
Sure. This is something I think about a lot, actually. I mean, teams are really core at everything I've done and everything I do, and increasingly becoming more and more and more important to me is the hiring and training process, especially the onboarding process. I've been thinking about this a lot, especially with bigger companies. Domain Serene, we had across the 4 different organizations, and front and back house, it was probably around 80 employees. Same thing at the Yellowstone Club, and finding just the bodies was hard. Finding that many people who could fill those spots. And so I hired often just out of necessity. But what I've learned and what I continue to learn and I'm trying to get better at is better hiring means you actually need less people, and so spending the time slowing down, fast is slow and slow is fast, spending the time to get the right person. And that right person isn't always the person with the most experience or the most certifications. It's usually the person who connects with the culture and the energy of the group. Most things can be learned, but that is hard to teach. And so being mindful, slowing down, hiring well, and then giving people a strong onboarding and ongoing training program. The other piece that has always been really important to me that I continue to lean into is professional development of employees. I think a lot of times, especially in hospitality, people think of it as a job. And I want them to think of it as a career path or an option for growth. And I have found that when we invest in others, that their tenure with us is longer, the turnover is slower, and that results in better sales and profits for businesses as well. And just the cost of turnover in any organization is more than anybody really thinks. And so the importance of hiring and caring for your staff so that you can take care of the bottom line and also just take care of people is great. We have a really cool program here at Brooks that I'm very proud of, that we use a lot of our service staff 1 day a week in an administrative role. So they have 1 day where they have admin responsibilities, and they all have something that's specific to them. So one of our employees focuses on inventory management, one of them focuses on helping with wine club, one of them focuses on events and some marketing stuff. One of them helps us with administrative work from a supplies perspective, but it gives them more connection to the brand and more investment. And they're also realizing that they're worth investing in. And so it's just this really beautiful reciprocal process of us investing in them and them investing in us. And it doesn't always work. People quit, people leave, it's fine. But I really love that professional development piece. And I've seen over the course of the last 10 years, really, if not more, the success and importance of that.
You mentioned earlier that the job of a somm is basically the job as a storyteller. So tell me about story and about selling wine through story. What are the stories that resonate with you? What are the stories that resonate with customers? And how do you get a story across to someone in the time you have to spend with them?
It's hard, right? You only have a certain amount of time, and you don't want to be like hovering with stories while they're trying to have, an intimate experience with each other, but paying attention to what they're looking for. Some people want you to stand there and talk to them the whole time. And they want you to come and talk to their friends and tell them how much you know. And look how cool this person is. She knows so much. She's here all the time. We get to hang out with her. I love that. And some people are like, please don't come to my table. I do not want to talk to you. I'm like, okay. So I think reading the room is very important. But the storytelling piece, at the end of the day, what people want to connect with are people. Some people want to hear oh, this is a 100-point wine, or they want to hear about the exclusiveness of it and how little is made and how special it is. But usually what they really want to hear about are the people behind the wines. And that's what I think working at a winery is so awesome for too, because we get to really go deep on those stories about the people, history, the legacy of brands, but also, the current iteration of it. That is what people respond to most. And certainly there's the other people and the other things that people want to hear about. And I'm here for that too. We'll talk about all of it. I've lost my edge a little bit on all the Burgundy things and Italy things as I've gotten more deep into Oregon. But the background is there, For me, I'm like, I don't really need to know more about that right now in my life. I do want to know more about how to grow and support businesses and tell people stories.
So when you first got to Oregon, you mentioned the first big thing you did was at Salina. So tell me about getting to know the Oregon industry through that lens. Obviously, you're representing a brand, you're representing a place, but you're also getting to know Oregon on a larger level. So I'm curious about how that time was for you in terms of focusing on Salina and a job you weren't necessarily prepared for, but also getting to know Oregon better and understanding the industry here.
Sure. I mean, it was my first real Oregon winery job. So I was. And Salina at the time is the winery over on 240. It's called Grand Cru now, or Grand Moraine, something like that. Anyway, we'll come back to that. Anyway, there wasn't a lot of people in the building. I'm a pretty social person, so to be alone in a building is never good for me. I'm like, bored, somebody talk to me. But I got to host events, which was really cool. I was pretty focused on membership. I didn't do a lot of stuff externally in the community at the time. But I really started to fall in love with designing experiences for people. That was probably one of my first design of experiences time, and it was built around events. But we would do really, really cool events, and it was fun to kind of have carte blanche to create whatever I could imagine and to be able to use my creativity to create really awesome experiences for a very high-end clientele around wine. And so that was really neat to get to do that and to learn how to present a brand versus my background as a sommelier, where I presented the world of brands to people. And so really kind of re-honing in on a singular product and learning about the appellations and, how to speak to the diversity of appellations in Oregon, the soil types in Oregon. And so it wasn't as much as the community as I got later on in my career, but it was definitely a deeper dive into what is Oregon? What does it mean? And what are these land formations around us, and what are they doing? And it's interesting when you're studying wine, you're learning about these things. You're reading about the Willamette Valley, and you're reading about Jory soil, and you're reading about punch downs and pump overs, but then you go there and you do it and you're like, oh, okay. And so it was a lot of that. It was a lot of connecting the dots between my education and what that actually meant. And that was really fun for me, and something that I've also pulled through as a thread is anytime I'm in a new place or experiencing a new thing, how to bring that in. It helps to establish credibility, obviously, when you're talking to people. If you've been to a place or you've done a thing versus I read in a book once, I had a note card for it when I was studying. There's a disconnect there. It's important. The knowledge is important, but the connection between the experience and then sharing that experience from a storytelling perspective is important. And Salina was really the root of that for me.
Give us an example of an event you pulled off there. Something that you were proud of. Well,
I think, again, from a design perspective, I got really into I'll just call it tablescaping, right? Creating the spaces and transforming rooms into really beautiful spaces, and thinking about color and texture and how people engage from an experiential perspective in that, and how important that is. I think that the details are often the most important, and sometimes the things that get sort of overlooked, because no one's paying attention to how amazing the color of the tablecloth was as it compared to the napkin and the underlayer of the plates, but I did. And it did make a difference. So there was a lot of that was really fun, and being able to design those spaces and understand the importance of that. But we got to do some helicopter stuff, and we would fly people around to actually look at the vineyards and to look at the spaces and to understand what the Coast Range looks like, and to see the hills as they, raise and fall, and what slopes actually are. It's hard to really get that if you're just looking at pictures, or even if you just drive by it but you're in helicopter, you get a totally different perspective on it. And so with Grand Cru, it was really about people picking appellations they wanted to make wine from. And so getting them really deep into understanding what that was and what that meant and how that then affected the wines. That was a great one. We did a lot of really wonderful events at Domaine Serene, obviously, as well. A lot of blending things and fun things out in the vineyard to get people engaged. Getting to taste through a deeper world of wine there was always really great. And with the Burgundy stuff, I got to get really involved with that as well at Domaine Serene. So we have a couple Burgundy projects. So I got to spend a little time out there as well, which was really enriching.
You talked about Domaine Serene, obviously starting there during the onset of the pandemic.
Yes.
Obviously a very memorable time for all of us, and a very interesting year in Oregon. So I'm curious, tell me about how you approach, you mentioned crisis and feeling like you're strong in crisis. How did you approach getting to know your new job and your new colleagues in that time?
Yeah.
And how did the sort of the coming out of it part work for you?
Yeah, it was hard because I wasn't even really onboarded yet. And most people hadn't even met me. And, sadly, we had to let most of the team go, right? It was a furlough at first, but some of our team's first interactions with me was me furloughing them. I was like, hi, I'm Jen, and you don't have a job anymore. It wasn't quite that simple, but it was really hard. Honestly, one of the worst days of my life is having to do that and having to walk into that as not really having my grounding yet with that organization or these people. They didn't know me. They didn't have any reason to trust me in that space. And, we kept a small group to continue just managing. And as we know, many wineries, pivoted and everybody did different things, and there was deliveries and online stuff, and, people were at home, so they were drinking. And so we saw some success in that. But at first with our group, I think we were offsite for 2 weeks maybe. And we were learning how to Zoom, and I was learning how my kids were running around, and it was chaos, but we were experiencing that chaos together. And I think I was able to establish with them that I had their back, and I was going to do everything I could to keep supporting them in this business in a way that would get us through it. And nobody really knew what was going on, but again, it's that idea of being calm and giving people confidence in the transparency that you're providing, but also the not panicking. Just not panicking is so important. Not showing your stress. A girlfriend of mine was describing me once, and she's like, Jen's like this swan on a lake, it looks like so graceful and everything's so easy, but under the water, her feet are moving like this, She's always moving, and it's chaos. It's chaos up here, but on the outside, it needs to be calm. And I think it's I don't even think about doing it. It just triggers whenever something comes up like that, calmness here, even though my brain is going 2,000 miles per hour to try to solve for whatever we're working with. So I think that's really important. I also have a really wonderful support system with friends and family, and having people that I can show that other side to and be the chaos and not have to be the calm all the time is really important, so that when I came back, it was easy for people to trust in it. But I think also showing the transparency of worry, it wasn't I'm not worried, everything's fine. It was yeah, this is not awesome, but we're going to figure it out together. And I'm going to work hard with you to make sure we get through this. And I think that that's just in general how I look at any kind of difficulty, or you can call it crisis management. I was actually thinking yesterday, I think I was in Montana a couple of months ago, and I was horseback riding, and it was with a bunch of women who were a little bit freaked out about being on horses. And I was in a pretty fast trot, and my horse tripped and fell forward, and I fell with it, and I smashed my face against his neck and came up with a very bloody nose. all these other women were behind me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, these women are already so freaked out. Like, if I turn around just like gushing blood, they're never getting on a horse again, right? And so the woman who was leading it, she's like, are you okay? I was like, do you have something that I can clean this up with? And she's like, sure. And I'm like sitting here trying to stop the bleeding, and thankfully I had black shirt and black pants on, otherwise it would have been a horror show. But I got myself cleaned up, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna get off the horse now. And I turned around, I was like, I'm just gonna walk back to my cabin real fast and clean up, and I'll be right back. And they're like, you don't have to come back. And I was like, oh no, I'll come back, it's okay. So I went, cleaned up, cried in the bathroom for like 5 minutes, cleaned everything up, changed my shirt, came back out, got back on the horse, and like rode down to the stables with them. For one, I needed to do that for me. And I was also mindful that the horse's feelings were probably a little bit hurt. And then I was like, all these women are like, they're never getting back on a horse if they're like, that woman broke her face and then never got on a horse again. So I always am thinking about, like, people are always watching, you know, your response to anything that happens is being observed. And I think that our actions are so much more important than we think they are, and so much more influential than we give ourselves credit for. You know, I don't ever think that I'm like so important that everyone's building their like life plan based on my behavior, but it does affect people. And I think if we're mindful about our actions, whether it's falling off a horse or being a leader of a team or going through COVID with people are always watching. And if we can be mindful about that behavior in front of others, I'm also a parent, right? So this is, I think, this way also. I've got to model what I want to see in others, and that's constantly on my mind. And I think in those crisis moments, that's what triggers in very quickly is, how do I make sure everybody around me is okay by how I'm modeling this moment?
You mentioned at both Domain Serene and the Yellowstone Club, part of what you're doing was opening new places, designing or opening. Tell me about that process for you. You mentioned something you enjoy. Yeah. How do you tackle a project like that, where you're opening a new location or opening a new restaurant on the same location? What are the kind of the keys for you, and what have you found has led to success?
I think there's a few things that are important. I think one, especially if you're working with an organization that has multiple locations, to find like common threads, so things that people are comfortable seeing. You don't want to be like a McDonald's, right, where it looks the same every time you go into a place and it's the exact same experience, but you do want people to recognize things. And so I always like to find little ways to, you know, sort of Easter egg the idea of a location at other locations. So it's like, at the wine lounge in Lake Oswego for Domain Serene, we had these big red velvet curtains. They're beautiful. And we had this space that we needed to kind of cordon off. And I was like, what if we did velvet curtains, but they're green? So bad example, but an example. You know, it's like the velvet curtain, the rich texture and colors and fabrics, but more attuned to the Bend environment. We had, so there's a lot of little things like that. Like, how do we pull in elements at all the locations that speak to the others, but then also create an environment that is unique to that space and to the either the theme. If it's, you know, like the Yellowstone Club, there was like an Italian steakhouse, and then there was a bar and grill, and then there was a Japanese restaurant, and then there was a dive bar. And so it was like, how do we make sure it's all Yellowstone Club, but very unique to that space? And so often it was, you know, what menus are we using? How do we organize the wine list? What are the bases of the cocktails? If it's a Pacific Northwest based restaurant, let's make sure we're using Pacific Northwest spirits. If it's an Italian restaurant, are we finding fun Italian wines and, you know, Italian aperitifs and things like that to integrate? Are we using Italian beer there and then finding cool sakes for the Japanese restaurant? So I think those were ways to really differentiate it. Also, like uniforms, seems silly, but it's important. Uniforms and service standards and just the way that service was done has also been really important. I think for Domain Serene, those through lines were more important, to have the things that people recognize, but then this richness of culture and space and was also really, really important. And so finding that balance between, again, it's kind of like we talked about the wine list, having things people recognize and then new things. That way there's an engagement. It's not just like same old, you know, it needs to be original.
So when Janie approached you about working at Brooks, tell me about your kind of knowledge and impressions of Brooks and what drew you to wanting to work here.
Gosh, I mean, Brooks is such a well-established brand. It's been around for 20 years, 20 plus years, really, even before Janie took over, obviously, with Jimmy. And so understanding the focus on Riesling was really cool. Not something I was super overly educated in outside of Germany and a little bit in Oregon. Obviously, Brooks is a leader in Riesling in the United States. And so that was really intriguing to me, was like, oh, something I don't know as much about. And like, this is really interesting, this range of styles. I think that Brooks has such a really beautiful brand that has connected people for so long, but it also has a ton of opportunity for growth. It's in a new iteration of its life, which is what was most interesting to me. You know, Claire Giroux is our head winemaker, and she took over a couple years as head winemaker. And so there's, you know, sort of changing the guard and style of wine and even like direction of communication. And so this story that Brooks has had for so long about the legacy and how we were founded and Jimmy and his, you know, passing early on and is still such an important part of who we are, but it can't be the core of the story of where we're going. It's our legacy, but it's not our future. And so being able to be part again of that storytelling of like, sort of rewriting that in a way that's important and the grounding and the bedrock of who we are, but talking about what Brooks is becoming and the importance of what that is, the things we're focusing on, the style of wine Claire's making, the focus on hospitality in the tasting room, this development of professionals here. These are things that weren't done before. And it's been a real honor to be able to be part of that and evolving that. And you know, this is my first general manager job, so really exciting. I was the VP of hospitality at Domaine Serene and then director of food and beverage at the Yellowstone Club. And this is my first general manager job where I'm overseeing multiple departments. I always worked with other departments, but I didn't get to oversee them, you know? And so again, for me, I'm like, cool, this is hard. I like hard things. I like to be pushed. I like to learn. I like to acknowledge that I'm learning and be transparent about it and let people grow and learn with me. And so it was really hard to say no to, you know, getting to not only work with the marketing department, but lead a marketing department, not just work with our wine club team, but lead our wine club team. And then train professionals to come in and just do awesome things with it.
Tell me about initial priorities. What did you need to do first 3 months, first 6 months, first year, and what were the kind of the important things you tackled?
Gosh, I mean, I think ideally anytime I'm going in a new role, especially as a leader, the first several months are learning. You know, my inclination is to always jump in and start changing things. It hasn't worked for me in the past. So from experience, I've learned, you know, seek to understand before being understood is a really important mindset that I have. And I get ahead of myself on it. I try to hold that line as long as I can, but I get so excited about the opportunities I see that I tend to like jump into the things we can change pretty quickly. But this idea of being curious and asking questions and seeking to understand before expecting to be understood is so at the core of my leadership values now. And so the first several months we're learning. There was some work that just needed to be done. We didn't have a tasting room manager when I came in, so there was some hiring that had to happen and, you know, just some work that needed to be done in general to help sustain the business where it was. Then it was about stepping back and saying, okay, where can we make a bunch of small changes that will have a big impact? And so looking at our systems, looking at our procedures, looking at even the facility, you know, it was like, an example is like there was a dented trash can in the bathroom. And I was like, why is there a dented trash can in the bathroom? Like, we should have a new trash can. Like, it's a silly thing, but people just stop seeing it. You know, when you're in a space for so long, you stop seeing things. And so I went in and was like, really at a very base level, like, what can we do with the facilities? How can we make it nicer for our guests and for our employees so that there can be more pride with these gorgeous wines that are being made? Let's build the frame to support the way we present those wines in a way that we're all really proud of. So tightening things up there, tightening things up with like uniform policies and like making sure that people understood how things were working, and then looking at how we planned and programmed. I don't love meetings, but like we sometimes have to have them. Communication is essential, and if we're not talking to each other, things are getting missed. And so there was a lot of people kind of operating in their own world to get things done and not understanding the work that others were doing or how to support each other in that space. So we instituted meetings, and I'm pretty sure people hated me for it. They're like, wait, what? Meetings? I'm like, trust me, put it on a calendar, have a meeting, have it set, have the time there. And now there's this really great collaboration and communication. People wanted to collaborate with each other, but everybody was just so busy. Nobody stopped to talk to each other. And so we've seen a lot of great growth in that. We've had an amazing year as well, where, I think our traffic is up 10% in the tasting room this year from last year, and our total tasting room sales are up over 22%. DTC sales are up 8%. We're pushing to 10. That's my goal, but we're having a great year, and so a lot of that is because there's this energy around working together and getting things done. Now my big push is to be the architect for the next year. So let's plan the year in a really great way. So once we get started, we're just executing and being able to really flourish in that space and be creative as we move through a blueprint versus always just kind of like acting on the fly. It just creates chaos. And so I think that's been a really important piece of it for me.
So without giving anything away, tell me about the next year as you're starting to plan it out. How do you grow on what's already growing, and what are kind of some things you're excited about in the coming year?
Oh my gosh, there's so much I'm excited about. Where do I start? I think that we've had an awesome year, especially in a year that I think has been challenging for many people. We're thriving, which is really wonderful. And so for me, it's about fine-tuning what worked and building on that, and then peeling back the things that weren't as successful and finding other things to do in that space. So that's the general sort of theme. Also getting all of our department heads more involved in planning and ownership in their departments and getting their professional development as well. It's super important that everybody feels like they have space to grow. So that's a big focus. We have we have the whole year pretty much planned out for events, which is really wonderful. Right now we're just getting sort of the fine tuning it. I was mentioning before, we have a NA beverage conference and celebration the second week of January, where we're gonna have speakers and people who produce NA beer and kombucha and NA wine, and we'll have a tasting experience and some panels. And this idea of inclusivity is so important, and often this is a little piece that gets missed. If people aren't drinking, they should still feel welcome here. And we're trying to create a space where everyone is welcome all the time. And we don't make NA wine, and we're not going to make, I'm going on the record, we are not making NA wine. Every time I talk about it, I feel like our winemaking team's like, Judd. And I'm like, I'm not saying we're making it. We're supporting other people who do, though. And that connection to community is just wildly important. So, we started in 2025 a program called the Brooks Artisans and Residents Program, where we feature a local business. It's either 1% for the Planet, B Corp, or diversity founded or led. And we feature their products in our tasting room for 3 months. On the first month of their residency, we do a pop-up event. So we're trying to spread the word of these really wonderful organizations and then bring some of their people to us as well. So we're growing that awareness and that connection. We have our first Artisans and Residents holiday market happening in December, which will be really fun. And that was really rooted in the fact that as I got to meet all these people, I was like, y'all need to meet each other. You're so cool and you can help each other. Like, let's get together at the end of the year, share your stories with other people, and then meet each other. Because I know there's some connections, there's some collisions. I'm reading the Culture Code right now, and it talks about this idea of collisions and creating space where people run into each other and new ideas are formed. And so there's a lot of that happening. A lot of how do we create spaces for collisions? And a lot of our programming is about community connection and involvement. The other thing I'm really excited about for 2026 is we're shifting. We do a monthly class right now. We call it Brooks University. So we have our last Brooks University on the first Saturday of December, and then we're having a big graduation party for everybody who attended, which will be really fun. Next year, we're doing what's called the Brooks Wine Lab, and so it'll be about how we experience flavor and smell in different ways. So one of them, we're going to do like a sound, experiential sound tasting. So you'll have, I'm not going to tell what wines they'll be, but maybe some of them are the same, maybe they're different. I don't know. You won't know. They'll all be blind, and we're going to change the way that you're experiencing sound to see how it changes the way you experience wine. So that's just one example, but we have a lot of those planned where it's more experiential, more interactive, more about the personal experience that you have around it versus, again, being told what you should be experiencing. I say the last thing I'm really excited about, like I said, there's a lot for next year, is we just started a new wine club that is a little different than wine clubs have been done before. Again, kind of leaning into this idea of do unto others as they would like to have done to them. And it's called Brooks with Benefits. And so it is a membership, right? Thank you. I thought it was funny too. I was actually surprised Janie let me do it. Not gonna lie. I was like, really? Yes. So there's 3 or 4 universal benefits of being a Brooks with Benefits member. And then there's a list of 6 or 7 optional membership benefits, and you get to pick 3 of those. So no matter where you live, if it's local, if it's out of state, there's a way to make the membership work for you. A lot of memberships are like, okay, if you live, let's say you live in Missouri, and you don't really care about free tastings in the tasting room or invites to local events, or, but you do care about your shipping discounts, and you care about, if there's loyalty points involved, or, discounts on wine. Those are the things that are important to you. And often people feel like they're paying for benefits they don't get to use, especially if they're out of state. So Brooks with Benefits is meant to engage people socially if they want to experience Brooks more, or if they want to bring it into their home. It's a quarterly fee, so it's kind of like a social club in a way, but not with the social aspect if you don't need it. So it's a quarterly fee that just gets loaded onto your account as like a credit, basically, that you can use for anything. So it isn't committing people to a bottle or 6 bottles or 4 bottles or 12 bottles it's giving you choice. And I love this idea of changing the way we think about wine clubs so that it makes people feel like they have choice. So that's something we're just getting off the ground now, but I'm very excited about that as well.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
You also just recently were honored by the city of Salem, I know.
Yes, I know. So proud of the team. Yeah, we got an Excellence in Hospitality Award by Travel Salem at this year's Most Oregon Part of Oregon Award. So what I love most about that is it was about the team. It was the best front of house and back of house teams. And I just love that, that circle of information where they're working so hard to do it without, necessarily wanting to be seen for that. But people are seeing it and recognizing it. And having come from the Yellowstone Club, which is very high end, and Domaine Serene, which is very high end, I think a lot of times people think great hospitality equals luxury, and while that is true, great hospitality can also be very approachable and should be. And that is what we're working towards here at Brooks always, is to create that approachable hospitality that makes people feel welcome and seen and comfortable and taken care of. And it was really wonderful to have the team honored for that.
So, in addition to your work at Brooks and elsewhere in the industry, you're also working with some of the organizations in the industry. Tell me about your work with Salud and Women in Wine.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, those are 2 really important organizations for me. I was on the steering committee for OPC for a while. I love, again, community connection. Women in Wine is something I feel very passionate about, and supporting women and women's stories in this industry while the equality is improving. We still have work to do, and it's fun to be part of pushing that forward and supporting women. I got to be the moderator at last year's conference, which was really fun, for one of the panels. So have a new love for that, and involved on the programming committee side for Women in Wine. So that's really wonderful. Salud is an organization I feel very, very passionate about. We have the event coming up this weekend, so very excited. I started on the marketing committee 2 years ago and then moved to the steering committee last year, and starting next year I'll be co-chair of the event. So very excited to be able to support that organization at a higher level with my time. I was explaining to my children that volunteering time is also a donation, and they're like, well, I don't understand, you're just there. And I'm like, yeah, but my time is valuable, and like the idea is what, that's how it doesn't always have to be money. They're having a hard time wrapping their heads around that concept, but we're getting them there. So, but no, Salud's such a great organization. I think the work that Salud does in providing medical support and assistance to our farming community, especially right now, has always been important to me and continues to be important to me. When I was in Kansas City, I was part of a young philanthropic group that got to choose how we donated money, and we worked with a migrant farm working community to help fund education for their children. And so this has long been at the core of how I like to spend my energy outside of work. Obviously, the wine industry is what it is because of our farming community, and wouldn't be what it is without them. And also just Oregon in general, with all of the farming that we have, it's such an important thing. So I think that in the current political climate, things have been hard and people often feel helpless. And for me, the best way I knew to kind of combat that feeling was to really double down with my support of Salud and organizations like that with communities that are perhaps feeling marginalized and having less resources, finding ways to get them more.
It's really fantastic.
Thank you.
Let's look ahead for you a little bit. Obviously, you've done a lot.
Yes.
You have found a lot. What is on your horizon? Is there anything personally or professionally that you're looking forward to? And is there anything you haven't done yet that you want to do?
Oh my gosh, there's so many things I haven't done that I want to do. No, I just really, for me, it's about growth. As long as I'm growing and changing and evolving, I'm happy, and there are so many ways here at Brooks for me to continue to grow and push myself and to help this business and to support Janie and the winemaking team. So I have a long road ahead of me here, which I'm very excited about. Deeper community involvement is really important for me. It's also about balancing that time with my family. My kids are getting older, and soccer is like a whole thing now, which is now my whole life, every day, it seems like. So trying to balance that. I was like, next year we need better boundaries during the summer. I miss going to the ocean, but that's just part of life. So I like to run too. That's kind of my hobby these days is exercise as a way of balancing this grand life we get to lead with wine and food. And it's also sort of a form of therapy for me. So I run a lot. I do the Hood to Coast relays with a group of people. And there's a social aspect of that for it as well. So there's a lot of that happening. Thinking more about how to continue to communicate about my passion around hospitality and the importance of it, not just in what we would think of as traditional industries of hospitality. I think that human connection is so important and ever more important as things get so much more digital, as I was mentioning before. And the way that we treat each other and therefore our guests or our customers, all of it feeds itself, and we do that, we go home, that energy goes back into our families. It's not isolated to a space or an experience. The way we treat people, they go home and have, their experience is affected by that. And so finding a platform to speak more about the importance of that is meaningful to me. I don't know what that looks like yet, but it's something, I used to do a lot of writing, which I didn't really talk about, but I used to do freelance writing for several years. I wrote for many magazines and did a lot of freelance writing locally as well as nationally in a couple international publications. So it was really fun. I miss writing. I just don't know when I'd have time for it. So I'm like, there's a platform somewhere there where I can talk more about the importance of connection and how strong our influences actually are. Again, I think people feel hopeless often and that they don't have a way of affecting change. But I do think that if it starts with us and how we treat others, it is actually so much more impactful than we think it is. It's that like ripple effect. If you drop a pebble in the water, the way that ripples out, it really moves through communities. And I think we're more powerful than we think we are in that. And so finding ways to help support that and engage people in that and find purpose in that is so important. And there's an author, his name's Young Pueblo, and he writes a lot about like heal yourself, heal the world, and just the importance of that core, kindness to ourselves, and then how that reaches out to other people. So that's something I'm looking at. How do I continue to talk about it? And the more I talk about it, the more I find that people want to talk about it. This idea of hospitality and what that means is becoming more and more important. And I love being part of that conversation.
So you mentioned that when you got to Oregon first time, 2010, kind of in the baby phase of growth, as you said, Oregon wine industry was growing. Tell me about your kind of initial impressions of Oregon wine industry as you started to get to know it, and what are the biggest changes outside of just pure size that you've seen in the 15 years you've been paying attention?
Well, size for sure, and then of course COVID. Those are some big things that happened. It's fun to see smaller producers getting their story told out a little bit more nationally. People are, it seems like, getting placements with more states, even if it's in smaller amounts. And so people are starting to know those brands. It's really fun to see a lot of my friends who were just kind of getting into the industry, leading industry now. It's really wonderful to see friends of mine who just started their little winery in 2010, really being a big deal now. It's it's so exciting. I'm so proud of my friends, It's like when I had friends who I waited tables with when I was younger, I saw them winning James Beard Awards later, and I was like, so cool. And that's what it feels like. It feels like my kind of group of people that I started to meet in 2010 and became friends with are leading their businesses now, and it's really wonderful to see. Mm-hmm. I think it's also a hard time for wine in general, and I think people are having to dig pretty deep and creatively about what it means to be a winery and a wine business, and what's important to people, and how to make sure to speak to that. And it continually evolves so fast, and it's so hard to keep up with. I think Oregon is really wonderful in the way that it's community driven. That community that has helped to grow Oregon is the thing that's going to help sustain it. Because again, alone, we can't do this. We need to come together as a community to understand how to keep up with that rapidly changing need out there, and how do we support and represent it. And that's not just in Oregon, right? That's all over. And we have a really cool program that we started called the Wine Atlas Collective. That's a group of 8 wineries across the country that are helping to support each other. And it's great. We get on calls and we're like, hey, what's going on with this? And do you have any ideas about this? And I just don't think that alone we're going to do it. I think it needs to be about coming together. And so we're seeing more and more of that, even though Oregon is so based in that. It's such a beautiful part of Oregon. It is, again, we've got a head start on it, so we'll thrive in that space. We don't have to just reinvent how to come together as a community. But it is really important. I think seeing the consumer attention to Oregon has been really cool, that development as well, and people becoming more aware of it. It's still shocking to me. Sometimes we'll have people come down from Portland and be like, I didn't even know Oregon had a wine industry. And I'm like, wait, I literally drive from there every day. How do you not know? But they don't. I think we think everyone knows, but they don't. I think there's still so much work to do in telling the story of Oregon and getting Oregon out there. And obviously the Oregon Wine Board and the Growers Association and Willamette Valley Winery Association, they're out there working so hard to bring awareness to brand Oregon. But I think there's still so much work we can do, which is exciting. And how do we do that? And how do we get out there? And for a business, an industry that's been around for so long and has grown so much, that feels to me like such a core piece that we still need to work on.
So what comes next for the industry? Obviously, you mentioned a difficult, challenging time right now. What do the next few years look like for Oregon wine?
I think people are going to have to rethink a little bit how we look at hospitality and what that means, and probably wine clubs a little bit. Again, this idea that we can create clubs that are cookie cutter and everybody gets the same thing and everybody's happy is going to start failing us. There'll be people who want to do that always, which is great, and we'll have a home for that. But I think we need to think more about how people are experiencing wine, because I think, and I could be wrong, and maybe I am, experiences are what are important to people right now. And everyone wants to have wine at home, and you're going to still have collectors and that sort of thing. But the way that people are engaging and bringing people together is so important. And I know not every winery, many wineries in Oregon don't have hospitality programs, but there's still ways to engage. We learned a lot of that in COVID too, with virtual events and things like that. There's ways to deepen engagement, but if you're leaving engagement on the floor as a cut strategy, I think it's going to hurt people. And I think if they're not willing to come up with new ideas and push on creativity and try new things, that will be hard for people, because I don't think we can do what we've done before and still be successful. It's not the direction that the industry is going. And so creating safe spaces for employees to come up with ideas, to be creative, and to try and fail is going to be crucial. Safe failing, right? We don't want to fail and blow a place up, but safe failing where we can try and it sort of waffles off, and Janie says yes to most of my ideas, but every once in a while she says no. But I'm never I can't believe you said no. It's such a great idea. If I think it is, then I'll keep bringing it up until she says yes. But, there are some things that she's like, yeah, no, John. I'm like, but that's fine. So I think it's about coming back to this idea of leaning into analytics and data, but also creativity. We can't leave creativity on the floor. It has to be part of the solution. And I think so many businesses are so data-driven. Well, this is what we see, and this is what the data tells us. That data changes so fast, and it's important information, but it can't be the only thing we're looking at. And we have to be trying new things. We have to be working with each other, and sometimes that's not other wineries. For us, it's working with local roasters and cheesemakers and candle makers and people who have a reach outside of the wine industry. Telling a story sometimes that isn't about wine is how we're going to actually tell the story of wine.
Last question for you. Tell me about, as you look back on your career, your life at this point, what's your proudest accomplishment? What's your biggest achievement? What do you look back on with most pride?
It's such a hard question. People have asked me this before, and this is the worst question for me, because and this maybe sounds like a cop-out, I don't think I've had it yet. I feel really proud about a lot of things, and helping to develop and grow businesses and professional careers in general is something that I'm very proud about. I think that one thing that I'm most proud of, I haven't had it yet. And I feel really good about a lot of things. And I just don't think I've gotten there. I think there's still quite a long road ahead of me until I get to that thing that I'm most proud of. But I would say, just in general, as a theme, the thing that I'm most proud of is the careers I've helped to develop and the people I've helped to launch and support and continue to support. And nothing is better than running into them again and seeing them thriving and knowing that I had something to do with it, even in a small part. Sometimes it's just believing in them and hiring a person and giving them that first try, because that whole idea of hiring based on energy and hiring based on connection and culture and personality, I think it's important. So, seems like a cop-out. I feel like I should have a better answer to that, but stay tuned. Ask me again in 5 years. Maybe 10.
Perfectly fine answer.
Maybe
I
10.
appreciate that. All the questions I have for you today. Anything I didn't ask that I should have? Anything we didn't talk about today that you were hoping to talk about?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think that, my overall view of my career in this industry has been so great. I'm so lucky to get to work in it and with these people and get to learn all the time. I definitely have moments where I'm like, maybe I should do something different, or maybe I should have done something different, or maybe I should go back to school. And they are very fleeting. Usually, honestly, I think it's hormonal. because the next day it's gone. But, I have moments where I reflect and I question, and I always come back. And that's the thing. I don't mind those moments of doubt, where I think, did I do the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Am I on the right path? Like, should I change course? And I spend time with those feelings, and I review and I reflect on them, and I always come back. And it's never not been the right choice for me. And I think that we have a challenging road ahead of us in Oregon and in the wine industry in general. And it's that crisis management thing we were talking about before. This is where I do best, is I don't sort of back down against the hard times. It's really, I think, when I thrive. And for whatever reason, my creative juices get a little bit more open, and it's where like ideas come. And I am very lucky. Janie is very supportive of that. She thinks a lot in the same way, so she's open to it. But I do think that wineries and really any business, I think, will do well to lean into that a little bit. And there's a lot of ideas that we haven't had yet. So.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Appreciate you sharing your story with us and sharing the intern house with
yes.
us, our first visit.
Welcome to the farmhouse. Newly clean, just for you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate this, and we'll let you off the hook.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.